So I'd like you to look at some springs. Springs push back when you squeeze them together. It's kind of got an idea of what a spring does. But we're going to look at one called the compression spring so that when I squeeze it down, okay, it pushes back harder. The more I squeeze it down to make it shorter and shorter, the more it pushes back harder. And you can see this is the Lee Spring. They're like one of the main companies in the United States that makes them. And they can literally make 16,000 different springs for us. They can even make more than that if you want a special one, but these are their standard springs. And you can see, look at this. There's all sorts of things to think about. There's diameters, there's lengths, there's loads, that's force, there's materials. Wow, there's tons of stuff. And what I'd like you to do is just go to this, and I want you to filter it down to something that sounds reasonable. So when you've seen your rough design calculator here, and you've got a couple of different sizes that work. Let's say we've come over here and we've found a few pipe sizes. Well, the spring has to fit inside of there. So pick some springs that will. Here's 0.736 to 1.49. So I could say maybe zero point 0.7 to 1.5, something like that. Okay, so if I come down here, the outside diameter would have to be somewhere bigger than zero point 0.7 and smaller than 1.5. And now all of a sudden there's only 3,000 springs to choose from. So that's cool. And now I've got the length. This is going to be the length of your piston stroke, basically. And it's actually more than that because then you got solid. But for now, let's say I'm going to make my pipe somewhere between 3 inches long and 6 inches long. Now I'm down to 864 that I can choose from. Now I've got a solid height, so maybe I'll say when I fully compress that spring, I want it to be between like zero point 0.5 and 1 inch long. Now I'm down to 161 springs. And I'm just putting in numbers that are going to help me figure out how big this thing is. Now, here's an important one. I'm going to need to have some sort of a load. Okay? And so, well, that one nailed it for me. The solid height one kind of set it for me. What is that? Okay, so I can either do a solid height. If I want to clear that, then I can also look at some loads and things like that. Okay, so if I want to look at loads instead, I could say maybe I want, when it's 1 inch tall compressed, I want it to be between 10 pounds of load and 15 pounds. Now I'm down. Oh, look, I got 23 springs to choose from. So I want you to just play around with this. You can look at what diameters and what it means to have a solid height and a load reference. You can look at these things, okay? And then your job is to show this filter. You're going to put in this, and then you can look at, by the way, you can look at different materials. What if I need just 316 stainless steel? Now there's even fewer. Okay, so you can show this on your spring calculation page. This is your calculator, leespring.com. This is how you figure out springs. And you may do a whole bunch of design and then get to the spring and find that there is not one that's working for you. Well, you'll go back and try a different piston, a different O-ring. There's many parts to go together, and there's no guarantee that when you start with one guess that everything will work out. This is one of the last ones to do because there are 16,000 choices. And so you'll probably come out okay, but then you'll just take a snip of this, and that is your spring calculation. I just want you to be able to move these things to get a set that seems like it'll be sort of a size that you want. And you don't know much about these loads, but you don't want 1,000 pound spring in there. And it's got to be able to push back enough to overcome the friction of the O ring. And so just put some numbers in there to show that you can play with this and get some information.